Hey everyone, this is American Priest, and in this episode of the podcast and the YouTube videos, I'm going to give you the answer to the Philosopher's Stone in the Western tradition. The alchemical answer will be revealed. First of all, thanks to everyone that's bought my ebook and my audio book. I have an ebook on Amazon Kindle and an audio book on audible.com. Both of them have the same name. It's called The Handbook of the Eternal Body, Secrets of Physical Immortality. And in that I talk about life, death, and secrets of physical immortality. And any alchemy and mystical talk in that book is much more from the Eastern perspective than from the Western perspective. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about the Western perspective and the Western tradition of alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone and Hermeticism. My website is AmericanPriest.com. AmericanPriest.com. Very simple to remember. Don't even have to write it down. And I have a podcast and YouTube videos. So if you're listening to one or the other, rest assured, it is also in the other medium as well. I'm a former Benedictine monk, and I have come forward to share with my friends over the internet different things I've learned and come to over the years. And today I'm going to talk about the Western alchemical tradition. And if you go through a lot of the alchemists in the Western tradition, as far as some of the big names like Nicholas Flamel, Raymond Lull, and Paracelsus, even Albert the Great, Thomas Aquinas, supposedly had the Philosopher's Stone, you're going to find a lot of talk about God, and you're going to have a lot of talk about God in the Western tradition, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. The mystical traditions of the West are very big in Western alchemy, and thus there's a lot of talk about God. I personally don't think it's externally important that you choose one tradition or the other. Simply do whatever works for you. I think one of the ironies, though, that misleads people in the alchemical tradition is the fact that these kinds of topics are becoming relegated to the New Age or metaphysics or alternative spirituality sections of bookstores or whatever list you're looking through. You're not going to find it in Islam, you're not going to find it in Christianity, you're not going to find it in Judaism, you're going to find it into wherever the kind of New Age metaphysics, occult, they'll put it almost pretty much with paganism. And what I want to emphasize now is that paganism exists within the subset. Paganism is a subset of these Western traditions. If you read a lot of these alchemists and mystics, so I mean all these strange deities and different dimensions and the elements and forces of nature, that's all within the traditional Christian universe. Now, unfortunately, Christianity has scared away some mystics here in the West, as has Islam and Judaism too. But I don't necessarily think that because some of the official doctrine can be dogmatic, that necessarily means you have to write off everything. The alchemists sure didn't. I don't think they were necessarily all perfect Christians in any sort of traditional sense, but they were certainly working with all the same stuff. So you get Nicholas Flamel, who is very well documented and popular, and there's even a cool fantasy series about him, Nicholas Flamel, the alchemist. And supposedly, when legends started developing and flourishing over Europe, and about Nicholas Flamel basically having discovered the two secrets of Western alchemy. Number one, how to turn lead into gold, or how to turn any base metal into gold. And number two, the elixir of life, how to live to be physically immortal. And supposedly he discovered both, and he faked his own death. He's documented to have lived a long time, I believe into his 90s, but according to legend and lots of accounts, and I'm choosing him as an example because there's just so many accounts of this. Whether you want to believe them or not, I don't really care. The principle's the same. But supposedly Flamel found a book by Abraham the Jew, or Abra Melin. I don't really care about the names. I'm not a scholar of history, and I'm not trying to be. But anyway, he basically found this book of some dude that had lived in like Africa and the Middle East and supposedly had physical immortality. It's a very, very secret book. And this guy lived in the desert in the Middle East. And he basically told Flamel, look, or rather, I think he said this in his book. In what he emphasized above all was fear of the Lord, reverence for the Lord. Fear not meaning, oh gosh, I'm afraid God's going to send me to hell, but really fear of God as the beginning of all wisdom. I think it basically means you realize how powerful God is, and that reverence and that awe leads you to seek Him and leads you to seek that power. Because if you realize how powerful God, the God of all, really is, that will encourage you to seek Him. I don't think most people get there. I think one of two things happens. Either you get so afraid of God as a kid, and maybe you grow up Christian and the stories of hell disturb you, so you just kind of turn away from it. And then you could go to the other side and just basically say, well, there's no scientific evidence for God, which is true, by the way. I mean, there's not really any documented research that there is a God. So, you know, when people say that, that's pretty much true. But that could apply to Islam and Sufism as well. That could apply to Judaism as well. And so, anyway, to make a long story short, the key for Nicholas Flamel discovering the Philosopher's Stone was a fear of God, a reverence of God. And the book he gave explained how to perform a magical ceremony or ritual done, you know, by yourself, one person. It's not a group ritual. It's a one-man gig. And the ritual was presupposing you would spend a good amount of time on your mystical path. You'd spend a good amount of time in meditation and contemplation. But the ritual is basically a way to summon your own guardian angel. And your guardian angel would explain the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone. And that's basically the common theme I'm revealing now. There's two other specific things to come later. But the key to the Philosopher's Stone is that once you realize how powerful God is, and if you can get closer and closer to that power, God will just tell you. God will just tell you what to do. And it's certainly a kind of scary thing in a sense. And it certainly was something the church didn't want to hear. And alchemists dealt with it by coming up with all these fancy formulas. And I do think a lot of those formulas and a lot of those systems, excuse me, a lot of those systems are ways of analogy and ways to study sacred geometry and mathematics and the cosmology of the universe in a way that can lead to an integration of mind, body, and spirit. But I don't think any alchemist got the Philosopher's Stone by like sitting around working out formulas and by just trying to like, okay, let me think real hard and put this all together. Oh, I've got it. No, I don't think it happened that way. I think it's a much more direct path, and I think it's asking God to give it to you. Now, the other part of the Western version of the Philosopher's Stone is this, if you need to get into concrete things. The Czech stage magician Franz Barden was a noted occultist and hermeticist, whatever you want to call him. He wrote some really good books that are very complex. Not complex, they're just very extensive practice exercises. You can go buy them from Amazon. Initiation into Hermetics is his first book. And that's worth the read for a serious student, but it's simpler just to try to get closer to God and have God tell you. But if you need something else, as far as the physical stuff goes, Franz Barden mentions that God, or what he likes to call the astral light, in some parts of initiation into Hermetics, he calls it the Akasha. But he's basically talking about the fifth element, the highest level of reality in the spiritual plane, what the different religions call God. He says it's most firmly concentrated in the human body in the form of blood and semen. Now, I guess it would, apply differently for females in the same way. However, if you're getting into a situation with trying to find the Philosopher's Stone, you're looking for two things. One, how to turn base metals into gold, and two, how to live forever. And semen is actually how people live forever. It is passed on that way. You produce a new life, and part of you lives on through your sons or daughters. If you wanted to live on, you would need to almost re-impregnate yourself with your own semen. And science will tell us that this is impossible. Science will also tell us that it is impossible to completely control the endocrine system. And the endocrine system, which controls the glands and the semen, the endocrine system can be brought under voluntary control. Now, most people advanced in a form of enlightenment where their mind has so expanded and so actualized and manifested that they can control all these bodily processes voluntarily under their will. Most people choose not to do it once they can, and most people don't want the responsibility. And in fact, many monks over the course of history who have had the capacity to voluntarily control these things, to have paranormal abilities, and to have the elixir of life, they have voluntarily chosen not not to do that, to go on and die and pass through the physical body and be with God. But at a certain point in divine union, when the soul becomes one with God, voluntary control of of anything in your body becomes possible. So one would circulate the semen back up towards the brain. It would be called what is reversing the flow, or as the Hindus put it, nature in reverse. The semen doesn't go out the penis in ejaculation, it comes back up the opposite direction through the endocrine system. And that sounds far-fetched, and it certainly is not only far-fetched, it's probably impossible for every one of you to do that's listening right now. But it is possible at a certain stage. But again, if you're at that stage, you're probably not worrying about it. I mean, that's kind of the great irony of the Philosopher's Stone. If you advance enough, you probably won't even be listening to podcasts like this anymore. You'll just pretty much know what to do, and the Lord will direct you. But it's good and it's motivating for someone like me to tell you that this is possible, and I can see some signposts coming up ahead in the distance. Maybe they're not coming up ahead in the distance. Maybe they're thousands of miles ahead in the distance, but the signposts are there. And the other thing about blood is you'll often hear that the Philosopher's Stone and what actually turns base metals into gold is a red powder of projection. Sounds like blood, right? Yeah, it does sound like blood. Unfortunately, I think that if you were to, I'm basically assuming that you're not a master, because you're listening to this. But that I didn't even need to say that. That was kind of just a stupid thing to add in. I guess my point is that if you cut your finger to get some blood and you put that blood on a dime or a nickel right now, or even a piece of coarser metal, nothing would happen. It would just probably make a stain and a mess. But the blood here is basically the blood of one who has achieved divine union. And once that happens, and the divine union has been achieved, and the Kundalini has fired on all cylinders, once that happens, your blood can be used in that way. Would you need your blood in that way? Yeah, you probably would. I don't think you would necessarily be at some point where you could just touch a metal and turn it to gold like the Midas touch. I think you'd actually need your blood at that point. So there we have it. Blood can convert. The blood of an enlightened person can basically produce enough astral light to change things, to change lead into gold. The semen of an enlightened person, and mind you, I'm interchanging enlightenment for divine union, back and forth between East and West here. But the semen of an enlightened person can produce immortality in oneself. But more importantly, with the elixir of life, it's the ability to reverse the flow of the semen that enables a person to achieve immortality. Because a normal person can produce immortality by simply having sex and impregnating someone. However, only an enlightened person, I believe, would be able to voluntarily control the gland system well enough to reverse the flow of the semen. And of course, all of this sounds ridiculous, and that is exactly why I don't really have a whole lot of mixed feelings or bad conscience about revealing all of it. Because, again, the Philosopher's Stone is one of those things that, it's almost like self-selecting and self-negating. If you actually reveal some of the endpoints, it's not going to make any sense to someone who's not close enough to them. So, take it for what it's worth. But I believe that the most important part of this podcast and this video has been the part about the fear of the Lord and about realizing the power of God and leaving it up to Him whether you will have the Philosopher's Stone or not. Leaving it up to Him whether you will live forever or not. And maybe, in my case, if you are doing a podcast and YouTube videos and putting them all on the internet, God won't trust you because He's like, man, this guy's not going to keep it a secret. However, again, I don't necessarily feel like I'm blowing some big cover here, because I think that right now we live in a market, and especially the internet, that is so glutted with information that it's such overkill that it almost starts to all swim together and cancel things out. So it was good having you here. Thanks for listening. And if you want more, go to my website, AmericanPriest.com, and I have an ebook, The Handbook of the Eternal Body, Secrets of Physical Immortality. And by the way, that is our friend East Forest. He produces some good ambient music. You can check out his website at eastforest.org.